Everyone talks about Arrigo Sacchi like he saved football. 2 European Cups back-to-back, a Serie A title, a squad so dominant that people still argue it's the greatest club team ever assembled. Sacchi is celebrated as the godfather of modern pressing, the man who handed Klopp, Guardiola and Mourinho their entire tactical blueprint. His name is spoken in reverence. His methods are taught in coaching courses across the world. But here's the thing. Nobody wants to say out loud. In building the most suffocating, most organised, most collectively brilliant defensive machine in football history, Arrigo Sacchi may have quietly strangled the most beautiful attacking football the game had ever seen. And the world thanked him for it. This isn't about whether Sacchi was a genius. He was. This is about what we lost when the world decided to copy him. Before Sacchi arrived at AC Milan in the summer of 1987, Italian football was dominated by catenaccio, a deeply defensive philosophy built around a libero, man-marking, and protecting the goal at all costs. It was conservative, often cynical, and widely mocked by the rest of Europe. But within that system, attacking players had something precious: space. They had freedom. The number 10 was a god. Creativity wasn't coached out of players. It was the entire point. The attacking phase, as Sacchi himself admitted, came down to the intelligence and common sense of the individual and the creativity of the number 10. That was the culture he walked into, and he despised every inch of it. Sacchi had grown up watching Budapest Honvéd, Real Madrid in the Di Stefano era, and the Dutch total football of the 1970s under Rinus Michels. He wanted something radically different, a team that pressed as a coordinated unit, defended high up the pitch, and compressed the playing space so aggressively that opponents had nowhere to breathe, nowhere to think, and nowhere to create. His 4-4-2 demanded that no more than 25 metres separate the defensive line from the forward line at any moment. Every single player had to understand their positional relationship to every other player on the pitch at all times. The system came first. The system always came first. To make sure of it, Sacchi introduced something that confused and unsettled even his own players: shadow drills. Full training sessions conducted with no ball at all. Players moved in formation across an imaginary pitch, responding to wherever Sacchi told them the ball was. They pressed phantom opponents. They shifted as a unit in response to invisible passes. A Real Madrid scout reportedly watched one of these sessions and left completely baffled, unable to understand what he was seeing. That was the point. Sacchi wasn't just training footballers, he was programming a machine, one where every moving part knew exactly where every other moving part would be. And it worked. God, did it work. With Franco Baresi marshalling the backline, Frank Rijkaard and Carlo Ancelotti controlling the midfield engine room, and Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten leading the line, Sacchi's Milan beat Steaua Bucharest 4-0 in the 1989 European Cup final. They retained the trophy in 1990, beating Benfica 1-0. Along the way, they dismantled Real Madrid 5-0 in the 1989 semi-final at the Bernabeu, one of the most complete performances in European football history. In Sacchi's debut Serie A season, Milan conceded just 14 goals in 30 matches. They were, by any measure, the most complete team on the planet. But look closely at what Sacchi actually demanded of his attackers. Van Basten and Gullit, two of the most gifted forwards in football history, were not free agents in this system. They were the first line of the press. Their job began not in the opposition box, but in the opposition's defensive third, harrying centre-backs, cutting passing lanes, and triggering the press for the 10 players behind them. The individual was subordinated entirely to the collective. There was no room for improvisation. There was no room for the kind of spontaneous, instinctive brilliance that had defined the greatest attacking players of the previous generation. Sacchi wanted protagonists, yes, but only within the strict boundaries of the system he had built. Now here's where it gets complicated. Sacchi's Milan still scored goals. Van Basten was still Van Basten, arguably the most complete centre-forward who ever lived. But the system's genius was fundamentally defensive, not offensive. The goals came as a consequence of winning the ball high up the pitch and transitioning quickly into attack, not from sustained, intricate, patient attacking play. The beauty was in the machine, not in the moments of individual chaos that had defined football's greatest attacking sides before them. Sacchi built a team that controlled matches. He just happened to have players extraordinary enough to also win them. The real damage came after, because when the world watched Sacchi's Milan win back-to-back European Cups, they didn't copy the nuance. They didn't copy the specific genius of Baresi reading the game, or the unique athleticism of Rijkaard covering every blade of grass. They copied the shape, they copied the press, they copied the high line and the compact block and the shadow drills and the obsession with collective organisation. And in doing so, they built a generation of football that increasingly treated attacking creativity as a liability rather than an asset, something to be managed, contained, and made predictable. Think about what modern pressing football demands of a forward. You must track back. You must press on specific triggers. You must maintain your defensive shape when the team is out of possession. You must be coachable, predictable, and positionally disciplined. The qualities that made players like Ronaldinho, Zidane, or the young Messi so devastating, the unpredictability, the individual genius, the willingness to hold the ball under pressure and improvise something nobody had seen before. These are precisely the qualities that high-pressing systems struggle to accommodate. They are, in the language of modern coaching, inefficiencies, risks, problems to be solved rather than gifts to be protected. Guardiola's Barcelona was the great exception, but even there the system eventually consumed the individual. Messi thrived because Guardiola built the entire structure around protecting his freedom, creating a false nine role that gave him license to roam and create. That's not copying Sacchi. That's the opposite of Sacchi. And it's telling that the most beautiful attacking football of the modern era required a coach to deliberately carve out a space where one player could ignore the system entirely. The exception proved the rule. Look at the modern game and count what's missing. The number 10 is nearly extinct. The free-roaming playmaker who could receive the ball in tight spaces, turn and unlock a defence with a single pass has been replaced by the pressing forward who covers ground, wins the ball back and fits the system. Coaches now talk about pressing intensity, PDA metrics, and defensive compactness in the same breath as attacking output. The language of football has shifted from creation to control, from inspiration to organisation, from the individual to the collective. And the players have changed to match. Modern forwards are athletes first, artists second. They are recruited for their pressing ability, their work rate, their positional discipline, the eccentric genius, the player who might lose the ball 3 times but then produce something so extraordinary it changes the entire game, is increasingly unwelcome, too unpredictable, too hard to coach, too much of a risk to the system. Clubs now run data models to measure a player's pressing efficiency before they measure their creativity. That tells you everything about where football's priorities have landed. There's a version of this story where Sacchi is the villain, but that's too simple. The real villain is imitation without understanding. Sacchi's system worked because of the specific players he had, the specific era he was coaching in, and the specific problem he was trying to solve. He never claimed his way was the only way. He never said creativity was the enemy. He said he wanted his players to be protagonists. What he couldn't control was how the world would interpret his success. And the world interpreted it as proof that organisation beats inspiration every single time. Sacchi didn't intend any of this. He was solving a specific problem. How to beat Catenaccio at its own game by being more organised, more intense, and more collectively brilliant than any Italian team had ever been. He succeeded completely. But the lesson the football world took from his success was the wrong one. They saw the press and forgot the players. They saw the system and forgot that Sacchi had Van Basten, Gullit, Baresi, Maldini, and Rijkaard. Players so exceptional that they could execute a suffocating system and still produce moments of individual brilliance within it. You cannot separate the philosophy from the talent that carried it. But football tried. Football is still trying. The irony is devastating. Sacchi built his entire philosophy in direct opposition to defensive football. He wanted to be proactive, aggressive, and dominant. He wanted his players to be protagonists. He wanted football to be active, not reactive. He said so himself. But the world that followed him built systems that made attackers servants of the press, stripped the game of its most dangerous unpredictability, and called it progress, called it evolution, called it the future. So here's the final judgment. Arrigo Sacchi didn't ruin attacking football on purpose. He just made defending so sophisticated, so organised, and so glorified that the rest of football spent the next 30 years trying to copy it, and in doing so slowly coached the chaos out of the game. The chaos that produced Maradona, the chaos that produced Ronaldinho, the chaos that, if we're being completely honest, is the reason most of us fell in love with football in the first place. We wanted to be surprised. We wanted to see something we'd never seen before. And somewhere between the shadow drills and the pressing triggers and the 25-metre compact blocks, football forgot that the most important thing it ever had was the thing it couldn't plan for. The thing no system could contain. The thing that made you stop whatever you were doing and just watch. If that story hit different, you're going to want to watch the video on screen right now.